Now entering the top 100. Fortuan is taking over the hosting once again with Duramboros.
Hello, this is Fortuan from the Hunter's Hub, and I'm going to be reading to you about Duramboros, which is by far my favorite brute wyvern. I have a thing for the herbivorous monsters in Monster Hunter, and Duramboros with its giant club tail. To be honest, the helicopter thing I think is hilarious. But I also like green is my favorite color, and I like real life animal goats. I think are really interesting. So this mossy giant green bipedal goat-like monster. It's so cool to me. I've always loved its design. So here are the wonderful comments about this amazing brute wyvern called Duramboros. Okay, first by Jock Package 1770, 5-star, Justice for Duramboros. He's the only damn brute wyvern, base monster, not to be in the 5th gen at all. I'm praying to all of the 5 that in a forest jungle map we get trees that can be knocked over by monsters. Picture it. Duramboros starts spinning, new players run to try and get away from his tail. He hits a few trees, then said trees are what carts those players rather than his tail. Next is by Sad Raccoon Boy. Honestly, he's one of those monsters that IMO really describes this series as a whole, at least most of the series. Super cool and tough on the outside, but when you get into it, you see how absolutely goofy and fun it really is. He's such a funny monster while also looking so freaking rad, and watching him spin and fly around the area is such a joy. It was an actual crime that along with a few others, he was put into stories, or S2, but not made into an actual monstie. I'd give anything to ride around on the back of this silly idiot. Next is from UltraShock1263. Best brute wyvern. Really great design. I love the back weak spot, incentivizes using pitfalls and going for the topple during the spin move to access it. It also has the super cool 2-stage tail break that first allows you to mine it and then carve it once it's busted off. The fact that it's a giant herbivore that's docile until threatened just makes it even better. 5 stars. Next is from King Kamina 4953. Okay, this guy is my all-time favorite monster. I can't even put on my finger why, but he just scratches my brain in a very unique way, I guess. His ecology is fascinating, and he's one of the more unique monsters introduced in Portable 3rd and 3rd Gen in general, in my own opinion. I wish there was more I could say, but this guy is just my absolute unchallenged goat, or giant cow camel dinosaur in this case. Next is Not a Rat 9083. Duramboros is so goofy. He perfectly portrays the giant peaceful herbivore just chilling in the forest, and then you fight him and he just starts spinning? One of the largest monsters in the series helicoptering around the zone and flinging his massive self into the air off pure momentum. It's been years since I've first seen it, and I still don't think I've recovered from it. If he comes back, I hope they keep the ridiculous spinning. 5 stars. That's what we have for Duramboros. Wonderful monster. Can't wait to see it again. This is Fortuan. Later.
Number 99. Risen Teostra. Again, I love the Risen Elders. Risen Teostra continues this pattern of being excellent. The pale, washed out colors give the impression of an older, tougher Teostra that then lights up when it enters the risen state. The fire effects look absolutely gorgeous, picking up more blue accents and particles. The sheer assault this thing unleashes is brutal. Even more flames and explosions dominate the fight as a faster, stronger Teostra leaps around the area and does everything in its power to destroy you. So much fun. 5 stars. This is probably my second favorite Risen. I think the color changes work better than Kashala's, and the fight is really fun for me. It's super fun to time your counters to his explosions, and overall it's very fast paced. Risen Chameleos' head is annoying to reach, and Risen Kashala has that expanding wind orb that just kind of forces you to run away from it, which kind of slows the fight down a little bit, but Teostra is just constantly attacking with really fun attacks to deal with. Still wish he had weapons, but I don't think it hurts him as much as Kashala, since elements were just so good in Sunbreak, and Blast I'm pretty sure got outclassed pretty hard in the late game. Most blast weapons were just kind of there as raw weapons that could proc build-up boost. Anyway, the gear is really good. I like the Powder Mantle skill conceptually more than Wind Mantle. If it becomes a 3-piece set bonus or something like that for the Teostra in the future, that'd be really cool. I think Risen Teo is a 5-star monster. Teostra is just a really solid elder to me, and Risen Teostra likewise is a very solid upgrade to him. My new all-time favorite monster. But if I had to say anything negative about Risen Teostra, it's that he is the Risen Elder with the least amount of differences. I wish it was capable of generating flaming tornadoes in order to have more attacks and have something kinda in common with Frontier's Supremacy Teostra. Still though, a 5 out of 5. Of all the Risens, Toaster had to be the least wow factor. He's the most on the tip of the nose type of power-up, and exactly what I expected him to be. Still, the bright orange and purple-blue paws make for an amazing look, and the fight is still quite the challenge, though they could also just add the Risen moves onto the regular Teo, or even Lunastra in the future. It's not that unique, but only positive additions to an already good monster. 4 stars for the Red Sun over Paradise. Risen Teo is definitely the weakest of the Risens for me, but that's not a bad thing at all. The design changes are a bit of a step down. The bleached hair, while a neat idea, just looks kind of desaturated and grimy to me. The rest of the body is okay, even though I think that the hair is desaturated, but I do think it falls behind the original's design. However, the fight is pretty good. The new attacks are really fun, and it's a good, challenging Teostra. There's nothing that exactly stands out, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Risen Teostra is the only Risen who misses out on a 5, but he's still a good monster. When your weakest member is a 4 out of 5, that goes to show how great your classification is. Number 98, Thunderlord Zinogre. 4 stars. Thunderlord is pretty good. It looks cool, and starting powered up, then going supercharged is pretty impressive. Much like other deviants, it's a Zinogre, but more. It does get a handful of new attacks and is overall tougher, but I don't think it's that superior. He's good. He's still suffering from the old school Zinogre being a bit cluttered in his design, but he's fun, and I like the thought of having a variant that pushes Zinogre to his max. Good gear, decent ecology reasons, and after seeing Apex Zinogre and Rise, he does have the potential to look awesome. It's a shame we got the Apexes instead of the Deviants, but as Thunderlord, I'll give him a 4. Thunderlord is a well-executed Deviant that I could never really get into for whatever reason. Like, Thunderlord is nowhere near a bad monster, but there's something about him that just never quite clicked with me. I think probably the main reason is that they just love using their paw slams, especially while uber-charged. It can get a little repetitive after a while. That, and they don't really gain any new moves from the base Zinogre, just modified Thunderbugs and some new combo paths. Even then, I don't think their combo paths are as interesting as the mix-up Stygian can perform. Most of them just boil down to extending their paw slam combos and the back slam tailspin stolen directly from Stygian. That's not to sell Thunderlord short. The Uber Charge is a cool mechanic, even if I think Bolt Reaver does it better, and I like that it actually slows him down. It would have been so easy to make Charge Thunderlord lightning fast, but I like that the added power forces him to slow down a little bit, and the extension to the paw slams are well executed, while those horn uppercuts are especially scary. Overall, not a bad fight, but like a lot of base generations Deviants, one I think could have used a little more. 4 out of 5. 5 stars for a single reason, and this might be a bit of a bias generated by Rise Zinogre, because Thunderlord doesn't waste as much time charging up. Normal Zinogre can spend way too long in the uncharged state. Good Deviant, somehow less annoying in G rank. The only thing I dislike about it is the weird yellow tint on the fur. Looks almost fake or made with like a paint bucket tool. 4 out of 5. Number 97, Legiana. A fantastic monster design. The fight isn't too difficult or as varied as it could be, but for me, the design makes up for that. Everything from the wing membranes to the colors, the ecology of the environment it shares, and its sound design is great. I would love to see this monster return in a newer game with a similar ecosystem full of cliffs where its gliding mechanic makes sense, just to see if they can improve on the fight moveset. Legiana made me fall in love with the Team Monster Hunter design. The first time she opened her wings and sails when enraged, I remember it was blocking the sun of the Coral Highlands as it roared, and I felt a very real shiver down my spine. That moment made it click for me, and I was enamored. I really enjoy Legiana. It looks beautiful, it fights beautifully, it sounds beautiful. An absolute joy to hunt, especially with bow, and it is so satisfying to break all of those parts. An all-around incredibly solid monster, 4 out of 5. Amazing looking armor, instantly recognizable roar, cool design, the apex of a great area, and a mid-fight. Legiana was on the cusp of greatness, but arguably the most important aspect of a monster is its fight, and Legiana's is a bit forgettable, so I can only give it 4 stars. World had amazing original monsters, and Legiana is no exception. The ecology and design are great, with the wings both looking awesome and having the functional purpose of taking advantage of the Coral Highlands updrafts. Legiana was also base world's singular ice monster, unless you count Kushala, who had it on his weapons, but couldn't even give you the ice blight in the fights. Out of all the big beefy monsters of Monster Hunter, some more slim and elegant ones are certainly appreciated, and Legiana fills that role perfect. That beautiful roar being a nice cherry on top. And that gear, the Master Rank armor, is some of the best in World in my opinion. One thing that bothers me though, let me cut that tail. You're gonna let me cut Namielle's tail, but not Legiana's? This fact actually annoys me a little bit. But otherwise, Legiana is great. 5 stars. It's kind of tied to the Coral Highlands, but I don't think quite to the extent of other world monsters like Radobon being tied to his map. Really, the only big thing that I think Legiana needs to make sense with a different map is for the area to have lots of updrafts so that the intended design of the wings can still work. It doesn't even need to be an ice map since the Highlands weren't. The beautiful bright blue skies and water we've seen from the Scarlet Forest and Wilds would match Legiana's colors amazingly. If there were just prominent updrafts there, I could see Legiana fitting in places like that. That's all Legiana really needs in my opinion, updrafts and the right colors to match with. Now go and read the comments of the other guy who has a Coral Highlands Monsters icon on their profile picture. No, the other guy. And the guy that this one is referring to is this individual. This isn't even the full comment. I couldn't zoom out my PC far enough to actually capture everything that he said. He spilled over on the max cap limit talking about Legiana and had to go into the replies of his own comment. I'm not reading all of this. I can't physically read all of this, but shout out to the #1 Legiana fan on the planet. You are recognized. Holy shit. Number 96, Barioth. I love monsters with dynamic part breaks. Each of Barioth's parts you break causes the monster to weaken and lose attacking options, rewarding the hunter for their persistence during the hunt. Paired with a simply hard but fair fight and great design makes this monster 5 stars in my opinion. I really love Barioth. Yes, I know some people consider it the worst of the trio, and I can see where those people are coming from, but it isn't as fast as Narga nor as strong as Tigrex. But that's where the beauty lies. It takes the best of both worlds without overtuning any one thing. Its fellow pseudo-wyverns are obviously great, but I think Barioth has more of a niche than people give it credit for. The design is pretty good too, of course in keeping with the feline theme, but for me, the fight is where it really shines. I actually like the fight so much I farmed the full Barioth armor set while going through GUG rank and essentially never used it. It's not my favorite ice monster, not by a long shot, but I still really like it. Definitely my favorite of the pseudo trio. The least loved of the trio for many. I think he's the best of them, a flying saber-toothed tiger with an ice tornado breath. Mechanically, this is the fairest fight in the franchise. He's extremely agile and relentless. You need to pay attention to his fights and wait for the right opportunity, which there are plenty of. By breaking his parts, you make the fight easier for yourself, throw him off balance, or limit his range. He is the reason why Part Breaker is a must-have skill for my builds, and it's a crime they didn't make the Tundra theme his own. 5 stars for my 5th favorite monster. 4 stars. Barioth is a really good monster that gets way more crap than it deserves. It's a saber-toothed tiger as a pseudo-wyvern, plus he gets ice breath. That's awesome. The fight is pretty fun too. It has a lot more tricks up its sleeve than its cousins in Narga, which jumps around fast, and Tigrex, which is a charge monster. I think the others are overall better fights, partly due to their more narrow focus. Barioth is a good time and has quite the toolbox of attacks, not to mention it retains some flight in combat, making it more dynamic than just leaping around. So yeah, good monster. I really love him. Sick design, hard to fight, always gets the good maps because it's an ice monster, great looking weapons and armor. Its weakest points are its variants and subspecies. Still, Barioth is a 5 out of 5 for me. Special shout out to its G rank armor, my main transmog for most of my time in GU. Number 95, Gold Rathian. The best Rathian. At least since Iceborne. Golden Loon's Hellfire mode and entire arsenal of backflips make her a worthy opponent. Not to mention, the metallic look is excellent. Easily my favorite of the Wyvern Queen sisters. Her shimmering gold coloration just exudes the energy of a prideful queen that's ascended to be able to challenge the gods that are the Elder Dragons. Along with her silver king, her searing blue flames meld well with the gleam of her scales as she teaches any foolish hunter or monster their lesson. 5 out of 5. Such a cool idea to give a lower tier monster in particular an endgame variation. It's usually saved for flagships or the already hard hitters, but having one for a weaker monster is so much more unique. Considering Gold Rathian has a fast-paced fight, a beautiful design even with the Hellfire, and useful armor and weapons, she has so much to praise, even if she is my least favorite rare species. 4 out of 5. I love Rathian in general, so a little biased, but Iceborne Goldian is one of my favorite fights. Love her so much. Crazy fun flip moves, the Hellfire mode, and just some faster and scarier physical attacks in general. I haven't fought the Metal Rats in older games, but the ones I have fought them in are great, and I love the final form version of my pet favorite monster. 4 stars. Really fun and somewhat of a challenge in Iceborne, in Rise less so for both, but she was still a good addition and it's her second best appearance. She'd be a 5 if she wasn't a Gen 1 monster that took till Gen 5 about a decade and a half or so to be made into a good monster. Number 94, Silver Rathalos. My favorite rare species just on looks alone. Just the silver sheen with the Hellfire blue rating, it's just masterful. Plus, his fight is great too with the more acrobatic shenanigans. 5 out of 5. Love him. He's sort of like my rival monster if I ever had one. Farmed it back in 4U because I loved the tower setting and found it cool that he was always there in this ancient remote ruin. Like an old, unique warrior king among Rathalos who can only be seen rarely and by the worthy. At least his mystique is greater than Dread King for me in this respect. His fights in Iceborne and Sunbreak are both fantastic and develop their respective Rathalos movesets for each game in compelling ways, and his animations in both games are just so cool. Also, his kinship attack in Stories 2 did him justice. Absolutely 5 stars. Great look, fantastic fight. This is hugely boosted by 5th generation, particularly Sunbreak's version on Silver. But take the base Rathalos and amp it up. Give it new attacks, a super fire mode, and you have a magnificent combination. It is still recognizably Rathalos, but takes it in a believable and grand direction for one of the strongest Wrath forms. While Sunbreak does some heavy lifting here again, he's always been a badass, ever since I first fought him in Freedom 2 or Freedom Unite. His weapon, armor, and overall aesthetic has always been way cooler than Gold in my opinion. The fight just gets turned to 12 in Sunbreak. Number 93, Jhen Mohran. My personal favorite in all of Monster Hunter. Sure, this quest could be annoying to farm, but there just wasn't anything else in 2009 that came even close to seeing the Sandstorm pick up, watching him jump over the ship, and you being the only thing standing between him and the city at the end of the battle. 10 out of 5. The Phase 1 theme is one of the best tracks in this series, plus the use of certain siege equipment at certain increments to protect the ship will always be a plus in my eyes. Lore-wise, the Mohran Festival really does give an insight into the minds of the hunters, the guild, as well as desert villages. Oh, a 1.1 kilometer sandwhale dragon that has been spotted out in the Great Desert Sea and is mistaking sand ships as intruders and rivals? What a wonderful day! Let's go mine precious ores off its back and celebrate afterwards, and if we're lucky, we'll get the tusks too. Because of this and some lore implications, I'd say repelling Jhen is better in the long run for these people, as it will be a continual source of metals rather than just one big source dump, and then you gotta wait for another one to appear if one ever does. So, your experience with Jhen Mohran depends on if you have friends to fight him with. In a group, he's a great time, probably the best of the siege fights. If you're solo, and especially if you never fought him before, he is overwhelming and confusing. So positives, he is an incredibly dynamic fight, bucking the trends of other siege monsters. You never feel as if you're waiting for him to do anything like you do with Lao, Shen, or Sideus. It's also super cool to be able to jump on his back to mine and deal damage. It breaks up the fight and lasts just long enough to be a fun thing to do, unlike a certain magma turtle. He sports a really great design, a giant crocodile crocodile whale sand worm with these giant pronounced tusks on the side of his jaw. He has a great bulk to him too. When he moves, you can see just how hefty he is. Downside is the fresh solo experience for me. I remember being super frustrated attempting to deal with Jhen my first time through. So much so that I don't remember ever progressing past him. For any reasonable amount of success, it seems like you need to spec bowgun and really abuse the siege mechanics. While I'm ordinarily in favor of counter builds, this one feels like a step too far. And yes, multiplayer would alleviate all those issues, but I am an anxious wreck and I really do not like playing with strangers unless I know what I'm doing in a fight. 3 out of 5, multiplayer siege fights done right, but a struggle for an offline player like me. There are monsters with great ecology or great roles in the story, but only a few shape the entire culture of places in that world. It is a culturally significant monster, and that's wicked cool. Number 92, Magnamalo. I never understood the discussion about his design being too edgy or fantastical when we have things like Zinogre. His fight is one of the best in Rise, and his high rank quest the only one that I found difficult in the base game. Saber-toothed samurai purple tiger that launches itself up into the air with explosions, dude, I'm in. I hope to see him in Wilds to see what it will look like in a more realistic environment. I said Viper was overhated a few polls ago, but at least that makes sense with the dual statuses. Magnamalo is overhated to the extreme, and I'm tired of pretending that he's not. Yes, the design is very out there for how grounded Monster Hunter usually is, and I do think that it's just a tad too much, but not to the extent that people say it is. It is very obviously samurai based, but that's an issue with most of Rise Break's newcomers that wear their inspirations on their sleeves, so to speak, and all the monsters are equal in that regard. The colors are beautifully vibrant with the dark purples and the pale yellows contrasting well. The Hellfire is great too. Fires being a different color from the usual reds and oranges are always cool. A few simplifications is really all Magna needs, and that's not some terribly impossible thing to fix. And it damn sure doesn't mean he should never return. The fight is where Magnamalo really shines. It's one of the few base game Rise monsters that accounts for the wirefall mechanics, so it's one of the harder fights in the game. It took me a while to get the timing right on the big ultimate attack for the wirefall. It's again a fast-paced fight with some fun moves. The Hellfire mechanic is really fun to deal with. Being able to hurt Magna with his own flames is sick, even if it's not that advantageous. Magnamalo is a great monster, despite what the YouTube commentaries would say. The only thing holding him back from a 5 is that I think Scorned is better in almost every aspect, but still a wonderful monster and a high 4 out of 5. The only reason he's getting a 4 out of 5 is because Scorned took his design and made it so much better in my opinion. And I actually like Magna's design too, but his theme, armor effects, weapons, and most importantly the fight are all absolutely stellar. I made everything from him. He's not very high on a favorite flagship list, but when compared to every other monster, I actually view him fairly favorably. I didn't like it on first look. I thought it looked stupid, especially the back legs and back butt. It really grew on me over time, and the fight's incredible too. Really helped. Beautiful colors. Hellfire Blight was pretty fun, but I think in reference to the Hunter's use of it could be increased in damage, and instead of a 1 knockdown first time and never after, it should be 2, then 3, then 4, I think. Great music, great gear. He's one monster where I might forget how amazing the fight is, and then be elated to fight him again when he returns. As a hunt, I really enjoy Magnamalo a lot. Currently in Rise, Magnamalo is the monster I've hunted the most. That never gets old. I am one who also thinks that he's a little too over-designed, in the sense the designers were making it look like a demonic samurai tiger that devours its victims, whose souls then transform into becoming his Hellfire first, before being an animal as part of a natural world. I'm fine with that. That's cool, but outside of Elder Dragons, I prefer the monsters to be a bit more grounded, including flying wyverns. I share this opinion too with Zinogre, so I'm not just singling out Magnamalo. If he somehow shows up in Wild's Master Rank, it would be a surprise for sure, but a welcome one. Number 91. Rustrazor Ceanataur. As someone who already really likes regular Shogun, this is awesome. The concept of it wearing a glavenous skull fits so well, and it uses it excellently. It sharpens its claws, and it even does the big glavenous spin attack, where it looks like it's sharpening, but then it lets go and unleashes a huge slash. It's also nice that they gave Rustrazor more water beam utility while on the ground, and the move where it slashes into the ground in front of it repeatedly is a good addition in my books. All around amazing, from the icon to the design to the fight. This is what Deviants should strive to be. I love Rustrazor so much, man. Back in my Shogun post, I mentioned how it would be cool if Shogun had different moves based on what skull it was wearing, as currently the Gravios skull gets a bonus while moving, while the other two have nothing. Rustrazor takes that idea and runs with it, giving Shogun a completely different moveset depending on whether or not it's Gravios or Glavenist. The new moves with the Gravios skull are pretty cool, but that's not what you're interested in here, are ya? The concept behind Rustrazor is my favorite out of all the deviants. You have Shogun, a monster with blade-like claws that wears the skulls of other monsters. You have Glavenus, a monster who sharpens its blade-like tail using its skull. So you give Shogun the skull of a Glavenus and have it sharpen its claws in the skull's mouth. Whoever came up with that, I hope you got a raise. And that's not all. Back in my Plum post, I mentioned how it'd be really cool if we got to see some of Diablos' moves. Well, guess what? Rustrazor does that too, with them using a modified version of Glavenus' Beyblade Let It Rip attack, except it does defense down now because you. Yeah, if you're gonna tell, I really like Rustrazor. My only complaint is that they are maybe a little bit too easy, but with a fight and concept this great, I'm not holding anything against them. 5 out of 5. We still need more crabs. Best crab in the series and personal top 5 deviant. Love that it uses mechanics from the Glavenus fight, such as the sharpening mechanic that increases damage dealt, bleed damage, as well as the hit zone changes. Plus, the charge slash has the same timing as Glavenus' charge tail swipe, which is a nice little bit of attention to detail. My only question about the fight is why defense down is dealt, as other monsters that deal it are using acid of some sort, but not Rustrazor. Maybe if it was the urine beam that it has, that would make more sense, but no, it comes from the charge slashes if I'm remembering correctly. It's not necessarily something about him, but Rustrazor just cemented that they should do more creative stuff using monster skulls as shells. It makes Stonefist Hermitaur kind of lame in comparison. I think this gimmick has a lot of potential and could give more personality to each crab. Like imagine one with an Uragon skull slamming into the ground to cause tremors, or one with a Duramboros that spins it around like that. I don't know, just something like that would be neat. Peak Crab. Rustrazor Supremacy, he's a legend, a hero, and the coolest thing ever. I really like Rustrazor. He's so perfect. He manages to take everything about the original, evolve it in a really cool way. I mean, like, he wears the skull of a Glavenus and uses it to sharpen his claws. That's metal as 5 stars, one of my all-time favorite monsters. Hopefully Deviants will be able to return at some point. Number 90. We turn back to Unnatural History Channel for this next entry, Diablos.
As you'd expect for a burrowing monster, Diablos just really helps the series stay down to earth. The role of monsters like Rathalos and Diablos as a clear benchmark in power in the series will forever prevent it falling off into the deep end. Diablos as an icon of brute strength works so well, because that's all he has and is most importantly all he needs. No beams or blasts or dragon super steroids, just bone, muscle and horn instead. It's simple, and with the series generally becoming more complex with its mechanics, not for the worse, the addition of some stripped back simplicity only gets more refreshing as time goes on, because that's what Diablos revolves around. As a fight, it's chiefly a bullfight, both above and below ground. Further moves it may have are just extra indicators of strength, with sweeps of its horn or tail. The Bloss Wyverns also show a very early utilisation of environment too, and whilst this obviously later became much more developed for monsters in Tri and World, where Diablos also got some destructible anthills to show off his strength, things like ledging are a small but important gimmick of their fight, that adds something a little different and encourages risky play using yourself as bait. Design-wise, Diablos is a simple meal well made. Elements of iconic dinosaurs combined with a dragon base to create an appearance that sells primal strength, and already clues you in as to how this fight is going to go. Ecology-wise, Diablos lends some much needed variety to the roster too. A bad-tempered herbivore in a fictional domain typically ruled by carnivores is always nice. One that exceeds most carnivores in physical prowess is even better. It is a credit to the originality of the team that even in day one, the Bloss Wyverns were clearly made as a step above the carnivorous flagship Rathalos in the base game. Diablos has always been portrayed with a certain strength and menace even above its rank. Much of this was fully delivered on in World, where much of that ecology came to gameplay at last. We don't need pre-rendered cutscenes of Diablos fighting anymore, we can watch it in game. And Black Diablos also represents an impressive clutch for a first-gen subspecies, in that its lore and ecology really sells it as Diablos Plus, brought to full display when Black smashes base in a turf war, rather than the palette swap feeling cheap. Combine that with a sand trap only Diablos can activate, a rare flex for any monster, and him sweeping the rest of the Wildspire, and Diablos was fully realised as a monster. Whilst I don't have high hopes for Diablos to appear in Wilds, there's always a chance he'll be back in DLC. And considering how much Ichinose both loves Diablos full stop, and how he's repeatedly trying to do different iterations of Bloodbath 2, I'm reasonably confident he'll be back in Portable 6th. Until then, or even later, he's earned a break following his successful role in the series and 5th gen alike. I like it. It's that simple. Not. A lot of people point this out, but he really looks like he fits his environment. Imagine seeing this guy half a mile off in the desert. You notice it looking at you and it lets out that blood-chilling scream. It just starts charging. There won't be anywhere to run, you'll just die. Or the thought that it could burst out of the ground at any moment and kill you, like in the dumb live-action movie. When you really think about it, this monster is so flipping terrifying, and I love it for that. 4 stars. Diablos is a classic monster with an excellent, high-octane, no-frills fight. It has a great design, even if I like Monobloss's look a little bit better. The ecology is cool, and the fact that it's a herbivore is a fun element. It is also a very learnable fight. Diablos does a few things, but goes extremely hard/fast with them, making it a very cleanly designed fight. It is not my favourite, or the best thing ever, but it is very, very good. 2 things I personally adore about Diablos are its equipment and its status within the overall roster of the series. Whilst its armour isn't anything special stat-wise, and the negative affinity of its weapons lowers their value, it's a fairly reliable set, not even mentioning how good it looks. Seriously, the gun lance is one of my favourite designs out there with how it uses parts from the entire body. As for its status in the roster, it's arguably the 3rd flagship of the series behind the Wraths. It's been in every game since its inception, and was treated as the main monster for the movie, for whatever that's worth. Diablos also holds a special place in my heart, as it and Bloodbath were my training partners for learning and mastering countering and parrying. Gameplay, really enjoy it, especially the small mechanics with the horns getting stuck, and the small stun for breaking the horns makes it all tie up to be a really solid monster. That said, please take a break, I need my boy Monobloss back. Or even both if possible, maybe in the next generations like game once we get every monster ported to the new engine. Ecology, an aggressive herbivore is fucking perfect. Its design amazing, really no complaints. 5 out of 5. What can you say when a monster's biggest sin is being so good it made Capcom forget its brother? Diablos is peak, the dual-horned demon of the sands. Diablo literally means devil, but it also goes hand in hand with being a dual-horned bloss. The way this thing has evolved is incredible. It has produced incredible fights, and don't even need to mention that Bloodbath exists thanks to it. Extremely striking and imposing, while also not looking a single bit out of place. It has the coolness factor so many anime monsters have, but it doesn't step over the ecology one bit. Now, if only some of this success bled over to Monobloss, we'd live in a perfect world.
Number 89. Pukei-Pukei. Maybe my favorite monster from World. He's just so weird in a really good way. Fusing a chameleon with a bird is already a great idea, but the poison tail and the color change when he's mad makes the design stand out even more. In World, Pukei was a solid bird wyvern. The way he interacted with the environment was pretty cool, and with them being able to consume different plants in the environment, and depending on what they ate, gain different properties to their poison projectiles, scatter nuts causing auto stun, smoke nuts creating massive poison clouds. It's a similar gimmick to Congalala, but changes it enough to keep it unique. And honestly, I find that it allows more creativity than Congas. However, besides that, Pukei was a pretty standard early game bird wyvern, and by this point in the series, we had seen more interesting ones than him. Then Rise happened, and Pukestain over here got a serious glow up. Firstly, they were upgraded from a low-tier beginner monster to more of a mid-tier level threat. As a result, they were allowed to be more threatening. Their gas attacks from their tail were something that was pretty rare to see in World, as they had to eat for a second time. Plus, they would often just lose the stored poison in their tail before they could even use it. In Rise, they can just perform this attack whenever they want, making them a good bit more threatening. I also love the sporadic poison-lobbing charge he gains in Sunbreak, giving it a good amount of threat to him. Plus, he tends to keep his inflated chin for longer, instead of just losing it for whatever reason. poison. The design is also really fun. I love how some complain that Pukestain isn't bird-like enough, but to me it just adds to his charm. I also find it funny that he is a total wuss when other large monsters approach him. And as someone who likes Gypceros more than most, Pukei is a way better early game poison monster than Gypceros is. 4 out of 5. On the basis of an early game monster, Pukei is great. It's the first monster in the world that can actually hurt you if you're not being careful, and it's got one of the goofiest looking faces of any monster, which adds a little bit of charm to him. Didn't think much of it in Base World, but the Witcher collab quest gave me a newfound appreciation for him. The new moves it got in Rise also made for a more fun and engaging early game monster to hunt as well. Overall, I just really like Pukei now. Honestly, Pukei-Pukei's kinda underrated. He's got a fantastic design, being a weird little frog chameleon bird dragon guy that can change the color of his feathers. His feet designed for treetop life. His tail, which also is an example of a meaningful tail cut, cause it takes away his ability to spread poison. He's an herbivore, which is always nice to have. He's got such an interesting ecology with his brood parasitism of the winged drakes, and the predator-prey relationship he has with Rathalos, and the way that's impacted the ancient forest. It's all great stuff. He's got a decent fight, he's got some nice looking armor, honestly, he's a good source of poison weapons early on as well, and he's a great example of a new early game bird wyvern that has a lot to have his own identity separate from just being a discount Kutku. 5 stars from me, honestly. Number 88, Rathalos. As my first real love of the series, I'm incredibly biased. There was a real majesty to him in the MH Tri opening, and his 3rd gen gear continues to be one of my favorite sets in the whole series. The Jhin being a straight up lava sword and shield sold me on the whole thing, and his badass samurai knight hybrid armor set design was so cool. As a monster, he does everything he needs to. Imposing, proud, competent, with a strong palette striking patterns without being too over the top. He's come a long way since Monster Hunter 1, and I think Sunrise might be my favorite iteration. I don't love that they've essentially turned him into the resident measuring stick or punching bag, but I guess it's to be expected as a payment for all the public outreach he does in non-Monster Hunter capacities. See Street Fighter, Smash Brothers, etc. The only reason he shares my number 1 spot is because Glavenus was designed as a land-based Rathalos, who also happens to combine lava and my favorite dinosaur as a kid. Also, bonus points to Razewing, who ended up being a pretty cool disability analog, which hits home for me, though I would have loved to see them give it a slightly cooler design once fully realized. I get it, guys. We're tired of seeing a Rathalos. I'm not. But let's be honest with ourselves. This is a 5 out of 5 monster. It is the Wyvern. In my opinion, it has the perfect amount of detail, and between the fire breath, flight, and poison talons, he is interesting enough. We have just been desensitized to it after all this time. One of my top 30 monsters easily. He's intimidating, sleek, and dangerous. This is just a small thing, but he has really good proportions in my opinion. Just look at any cutscene of this beautiful beast flying, the size of the head and tail, along with the position of the wings, makes this guy look like he should be able to fly. Rathalos' design really makes him look like the king of the skies. I think the reason people dislike him is similar to the reason people hate on Charizard. It isn't flawed by any stretch of the imagination, it's just too popular and people hate to be generic. He's pretty much only gotten better with every game. People want him to take a break, but I think it would just feel wrong to not have him in a game along with Rathian. I wish they'd bring back his 3rd gen armor designs though. They're so much better than the originals, which they went back to in World and Rise for some reason. He is the perfect flagship. He is a pretty tough challenge for beginning hunters, but is easy enough to figure out after a couple of hunts. He shows you how useful it is to prepare before every hunt, because the battle goes a lot smoother with things like flash bombs and antidotes. I think he's a great gatekeeper for the higher tier monsters that makes you think hard while you're fighting. Also, he looks sick. 5 out of 5. A great Pikachu. They've made the fight appropriately challenging and believable in Rise. He's got a lot of cool gear, not fond of all of it, but a fair amount of it, and I appreciate the armor always being the if in doubt, this'll do for you until you actually need to think a little bit more mid-game option. Even the past iterations, while not complex enough to rival his peers, the implementation of things like the Heavens Mount nest tilting with his fireballs is really cool. Not my favorite, but I respect it. Like I said, great Pikachu. Probably better than Agumon. His world design is a little bit dull, but I still think it looks okay, and I like most of his designs in general, aside from the slight grievances I have, that I think the tail is growing a bit short and a bit wide at the tip. The goat. Truly an impeccable beast. There's not too much fluff I can give. He's just the guy. The only reason he's not a 5 for me is because he doesn't do too much to stand out overall. 4 out of 5. Number 87, Coral Pukei-Pukei. One of the best subspecies in the series, both from the color design and the completely radical shift in how you fight this monster. It's one of the few monsters who I feel you need to have their elemental resistances in order to have a chance at their fights. One of the best things I could say about Coral is that when you cut the tail, it loses most of its moveset, severely nerfing it. Capcom needs to do this more, because it really demonstrates how strategic hunting can be. I expected Almudron to be in the same boat when you cut off its tail, but it is completely unaffected. A very good example on how to properly execute a subspecies. It still maintains the identity of Pukei-Pukei while delivering a very different fight and ecology. I was incredibly pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed this monster, and they got very creative with his moveset too. I like how the water stream can split when he's enraged. Arguably the single best subspecies Capcom has ever conceived. This is the culmination of 15 years of experimenting with the concept, and the Iceborne team absolutely nailed it with all of the new subspecies. However, Coral Pukei stands out amongst all of them as by far the most enjoyable to hunt. He's also one of the few water-based monsters that can execute the water element gimmick extremely well, 5 out of 5. This is exactly how to do a subspecies in Monster Hunter. Clearly was in the past a full-on Pukei-Pukei that changed due to its diet, a classic evolutionary response. He has a more distinct behavior from the original along with unique moves, just a phenomenal monster, and so much better than here's a new colored monster from Master Rank. Number 86. Our next guest is a video essayist and opinion piece writer on the Monster Hunter community that I am a fan of. This is Maki GS presenting for Molten Tigrex.
Hey everyone, it's Maki GS. You might recognize me from my videos on Scarlet Mystery Man, old Monster Hunter stories like Molten Tigrex, who's one of my favorite monsters. Speaking of which, let's read some of your comments about this monster. From Malo2902, the best version of Tigrex. Full stop. He takes everything that made Brute Tigrex such a great subspecies and amps it up by increasing in size and adding area denial through blast clouds. Despite actually being a fairly slow monster, he hits really hard, and his size means he has quite a long reach. His charges, jumps, and spins are deceptively easy to get hit by even if you see them coming because of how big he is. He's actually in one of my top 10 favorite monsters in the series because he's just that much fun to fight. His gear looks so metal too. Would love to see this one come back. He's my favorite rare species, man. 4th gen cooks so hard with the new additions. No wonder it's my favorite generation. It's really fun hunting this monster, especially once it gets enraged. You'd really want to be careful when doing dive evade, as this monster doesn't stop charging and constantly roars that catches you off guard. From Master of Hammers, it's such a shame he wasn't in Rise. Would have fit right in. But no matter, he's amazing. He literally screams explosions. The red and brown color is so awesome. He starts off slow and sluggish, but significantly picks up the pace when enraged. It's not the most difficult thing to put down, but such a treat nonetheless. 5 stars. I agree. I wish this monster was added in one of the title updates of Sunbreak. From Stormer JC 9493. Honestly, a pretty awesome rare species, and I like the thought that Tigrex is so tough and all. Terrain predator that only time he species is in volcanic environments, with Brute and now Molten Tigrex. I'd personally like him to be fought in the volcanic areas too. I love how massive he is, how he turns into an absolute fright train over the fight. He's got a great gear, ecologically. It's a little silly, but not completely ridiculous, so he still gets a 5, but he's a bit good as a base Tigrex. Yeah, I would like to hunt this monster out of the arena too. Apparently, the monster used to roam in the Great Forest. It's not something we see in game, but in the near future, if there's a locale that's rich in oxygen, we'd likely see Molten Tigrex. from Menectrix 2000, 4 out of 5. This guy was one of the reasons I was excited to play for you. I had heard so many good things about the fight and wanted to judge it myself. I agree that Molten Tigrex needs to come back, especially given how they could upgrade him a la Lucent Nargacuga. The blast element makes his fight way more interesting. It's a ferocious fight like Tigrex always is, with a new factor to keep you on your toes. Just as I mentioned a while ago, I wish it was added as a title update in Sunbreak alongside with Lucent Nargacuga by Sacred 944. Very cool, but undercooked. A super large Tigrex with explosions makes him very dangerous to fight. Even with the basic Tigrex moveset, he also looks cool, but he's just kinda a black and red Tigrex with an occasional blast cloud. Really wish he appeared in World or Rise so we could get a fight update akin to the Metal Wraths or Lucent Nargacuga. I'd love to see what they do with Molten Tigrex if it makes a return. Have to figure something out for it to distinguish, rather emphasize why it's much dangerous than a Brute Tigrex.
Number 85, Akantor. Indomitable is the best word to describe Akantor, especially with his theme that sounds like a mockery of a hero theme. He just encapsulates how much of an ungodly titan he is with his slow yet devastating damage. 5 out of 5. Absolutely a 5-star monster, just all around great from every aspect possible. Great design and ecology and fight. I love how he's perfectly adapted to killing the giant ore eaters of the volcano with those massive tusks designed to punch through Gravios' shell, and I love the yin-yang thing he has with Euconlos. He's absolutely on my wish list of wilds. He and Euconlos will make a great title update. He's amazing and the absolute apex predator of the volcano. My only gripe with him is the theme, but besides that, he is close to perfection in my eyes, with the fight, the gear, the intro cutscenes, the ecology, and that awesome roar. I'll give him 4 stars. Probably the most metal monster design in the entire series. His fight is decent, but his hitboxes are absolute garbaggio, and his theme is just, aight. Definitely in my top 10 monsters that I want to return in Wilds, though. Goddamn, this big dude is so cool. Like, incredibly cool. He's like the coolest. Fight is decent, not amazing, but good, and pretty fun. I particularly enjoy it in GU with Valor Longsword. Countering his heavy attacks feels super sick. His design is absolutely wild, just this big, spiky demon. I love it. Akantor activates that primitive brain cell in my head that makes me really happy. 4.5 stars, rounded up to 5, the Black God reigns.